surge of annoyance. Abraham had neglected to bring wood in from the shed before he left. She tossed 2 of the pieces onto the fire. If Abraham didn't return soon, she would have to go outside to the woodshed herself. She did not relish that thought. The wind hammered against the door and whistled through the chinks and cracks between the logs, where pieces of wattle had loosened and washed away during the fall rains. Abraham had not yet repaired the gaps, nor plastered the interior walls as he'd promised. Lydia dropped wearily into a chair beside the table and let her fingers play at the pages of a book she had been reading earlier and set aside. Glancing down, she pulled the bulky leather-bound Bible closer and began to read, her lips moving silently with the rhythm of the words. "Who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is far above rubies. The heart of her husband doth safely trust in her, so that he shall have no need of spoil. She will do him good and not evil all the days of her life. She seeketh wool and flax, and worketh willingly with her hands. She's like the merchant's ships, she bringeth her food from afar. She riseth also while it is yet night, and giveth meat to her household, and a portion to her maidens. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard." Lydia's mind wandered from the page, in spite of the fact that this was one of her favorite passages. She considereth a field, and buyeth it. With the fruit of her hands she planteth a vineyard. 6 years ago, she and Abraham, newly married, had purchased their 15 acres in Greene County, Illinois, built the small cabin, and planted 10 acres of wheat and 5 of corn. She smiled as she recalled the happiness of those early days. Abraham had been affectionate and attentive, and she had been content working alongside him in the fields. She couldn't remember when she'd first met Abraham Dawson. She simply had always known him. Her family and his had resided in Greene County for generations. The first time she became aware of him, however, was the night he asked her to dance at the Harvest Social. That was in 1824. She remembered the year because it was the summer of her 15th birthday. She married Abraham 2 years later in the old stone Baptist church in the middle of the town square. Abraham's father was a logger, as were Abraham and his 3 brothers. Abraham was the oldest of the boys and the most headstrong. A few months after they wed, Abraham quit his work as a log cutter after a bitter argument with his father, took Lydia, who was 2 months pregnant, and moved to the fringes of the county. He cleared the land, planted it, and built a cabin himself. Lydia bore their 2 children, Elizabeth Ann and James, in the drafty 1-room shelter. She sighed softly. What had gone wrong since then she couldn't quite frame into words. Abraham had grown distant and surly, and she sensed that his ardor for her had cooled. His whiskey and card-playing seemed to isolate her further. The preceding spring, he had been forced to take out a mortgage on the farm in order to pay his gaming debts, and almost the entire summer's crop had been forfeited as a result of a run of bad luck, as Abraham termed it. Lydia feared they would be turned out of their home before the winter was over. The knot in her stomach clenched into an iron fist. A ferocious gust of wind shook the wooden shutters, interrupting Lydia's dark thoughts. Feeling utterly discouraged, she threw the remaining log onto the dying fire. Slumped in her chair, Lydia felt a jarring hand on her shoulder. She awoke to find Abraham standing over her, his dark brows knit together in displeasure.
"The fire's out. It's cold as a tomb in here, Lydia."
She motioned to the firewood box. His eyes followed unsteadily. Lydia noticed they were puffy and shot with red.